Yes, please. Perfect. Okay. All right, Jesse.
From Rabbi Kelman. I'm very happy that he's here to join with us. He runs a program called 613 for Orthodox conversion program. People that are interested in converting to Judaism. He's running a program at Ohav Zedek out of Manhattan. He's also running a program called Kelman, a student organization, and he's currently in Israel. So thank you for joining us, given the time difference. So now he's going to be speaking to us a little bit about, his experience working with converts, having converted over 300 people successfully to Orthodox Judaism, and he's got a very unique perspective that he's here to share with us today. Also have a personal connection. I worked with him several years ago with his program at Ohav Zedek. A great program, a lot of learning done, and he does some really great work. And I'm very happy that he's here with us today. So, Rabbi Kelman, join us and take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesse. Thank you very much for asking me. It's a pleasure to be here, to be almost in Teaneck. As we know, Teaneck, it's almost Ira Kodesh, and I'm in Yerushalayim, so we're really one right now. So, and I want to thank Beth Aaron. It looks like you got a great roster of programming, and Rabbi Rothwax and the entire shul. So, let me just start by saying, as Jesse mentioned, so yeah, I've been doing this for over 15 years. I haven't personally converted everybody. I was involved on the Beit Din itself while I was teaching and overseeing the program for until the RCA, started their Batei Din, and since then I've just really prepared people. So, but it's been somewhere over 300 people that I've helped lead to conversion. It's really, and I have to say, it's been one of the great merits and highlights of my life to be able to deal with so many amazing people. I mean, every single one is a true treasure, as we'll try to get across a little bit today. Also, if you have any specific questions, I'm going to talk, it's not going to be, I'll talk about some halachic issues, but it's going to be a little bit more some of the, like I said, some of the misperceptions and the misconceptions that people have about Gerut, at least that I've seen, and talk about really some of the things that we often don't talk about in terms of our obligations as well. But again, if you have any specific questions, I'll try to keep looking. I'll try to look at the chat box if you want to specifically ask things. I want to begin just with a couple of sources about Gerut, about really our approach to converts and the whole issue. So the Rambam in his Hilchot Deot, right, in his part of his Mishnah Torah that describes our characteristics, how we're supposed to really look upon life. So he tells us, I'll read it in English to make it easier. Levian convert who has come to rest under the wings of the Almighty fulfills two positive commandments. Okay, so there are two mitzvot involved with caring for a convert. One for the convert who is also included among the neighbors, right? We have to care for all people, right? So a convert fits into that, of course, as well. And one because they are a convert, and the Torah states, and you shall love the convert. We have to love the convert. The Torah is very, very specific about this. And as some of you are probably aware, the Gemara tells us, and my brother tried to figure this out recently with the help of some other people, that the Gemara mentions that there are 36 references to loving the convert and to being sensitive to the convert. And then there's another opinion, there are actually 46. So we're talking about a mitzvah, and this is the irony if you've been following what's gone on the last 10, 15 years in the realm of conversion and how much pain converts, amazing people have how much pain has been caused to them because of some of the, without getting into right now, some of the things that have been going on. It's astounding to me that God is telling us, these are my special children. You have to be careful. You have to love them. And yet, sometimes we don't fulfill that. So there's two special mitzvot to love the convert. So again, the Rambam continues, God has commanded us concerning the love of the convert, just as he has commanded us concerning loving himself. There's a connection between loving God and loving the convert. They're almost on the same level. That's what the Rambam tells us, as it states, and you shall love God, your Lord. God loves converts, as the Torah notes, and he loves converts, right? Hashem, God loves the converts. So it's not just that God is sort of like many mitzvot, it's just telling us objectively you have to do this, but God here is inserting himself into the mitzvah. He's saying, I love converts. You also have to love converts. And why? What is it about converts? I want to bring to you a midrash, which is a beautiful idea. The medrash is from Bamidbar Rabbah. The medrash tells us that a king has many flocks of sheep, and one day a stag, a deer, appears and joins the sheep. The stag grazes with the sheep and returns with them at night as if he were a sheep, right? He's got this guy, one of these things is not like the other, one of these things this doesn't belong. A stag, a deer shows up with hundreds of sheep. What is going on here? When the shepherds tell the king of the stag, the king takes great pride and interest in it and ensures that the shepherds treat the stag with special care. The shepherds question the king, asking, you have thousands of animals over which you don't really care. You don't take any personal interest in these other animals. Why are you so interested in this stag, in this deer? What is it about it? The king answers them, my sheep have only one flock to join and cannot leave, right? They're followers, they stay among themselves. But this stag has the whole world to choose from. Yet he chose my flock. He surely deserves my special attention and care. So that's obviously analogous to God. God is the king of the world. God sees that there are 7 billion people in the world. There are 14, 15 million Jews. Those almost 7 billion people can do whatever they want, can choose whatever they want. And then you have these incredible people who choose to join the Jewish people. God's not going to care for them. God's not going to have a special love for them. So this is a beautiful idea that we have right here. Okay, so I'll just read one more idea, which is from the Sefer HaChinuch, which tells us what the mitzvah really is. We are commanded to love the convert. In particular, we are directed not to cause converts to suffer in any way, but rather to do them good and charitably as they deserve and as we can. To the best of our abilities, we have to love the convert. The converts are all those who have joined us from other nations and abandoned their religion and joined ours. About this group, the Torah says, love the converts since you were strangers, right? That's it. So the Sefer HaChinuch brings an additional pasuk. Again, there are many of them, as I mentioned, up to 36 or 46 references. But the more specific ones are the clearer ones jump out at us, and that we know that the Torah gives a reason as well that we have to have a special love for converts because we were all strangers, right? A convert, in a sense, at the beginning is a stranger, right? The same word for convert, ger, can be used for stranger. We were strangers in the land of Egypt. We know what it is to feel bereft of our home, bereft of our. That's not what the convert should be. Converts should have full freedom of choice, but we know what it means to be possibly discriminated against, and therefore we have a special requirement to make sure to be as sensitive as possible to the converts. So like I said, I wanted to talk about some of the misconceptions perhaps that we have about conversion. So let me even ask you, if anybody wants to join in by writing, by even saying, you can unmute yourself. What are some of the most famous things we know about conversion? What are the, when you say, let's start at maybe simpler. What converts are we not allowed to take or we're not supposed to take, right? What do people often say right away, right? There are people who are famous, right, who are converted, and people will often, you'll see people make comments, well, that person shouldn't have converted. Why? Because they converted for marriage, they converted for this, who do they think they're? So that's a very big misconception I want to deal with a little bit, again, without talking a little bit about the halachic aspects, but talking also about my experience. So first of all, I'm going to share my screen for a second here. Okay, all right, so hopefully you all see this. Okay, so before I get to that, I actually want to share a letter. A famous letter that the Rambam, right, the great Maimonides, wrote to another convert. His name was Obadja, and then we'll discuss again some of the issues in conversion. What are supposed to be the motivations of a convert? So first, again, this also sets the stage for the way we treat a convert, and that's also a little bit of misconception we can talk about. So I'll just read with you a little bit. So I'm skipped the beginning of the letter. Basically, the convert, Ovadja, and even the word convert, of course, we shouldn't really use, right? Once a person converts, as we'll see in this letter, that person is Jewish, like I'm Jewish, like Moshe Rabbeinu was Jewish. And in fact, this week's parsha coming up in the States, we just read it yesterday in Israel, is Bahalotcha, right? So who was the first convert according to our rabbis? The first convert was whom? Anybody? Yes? No?
Abraham.
So that's what people often say, right? We have the famous Rashi, right? Okay, good. Avram. We could talk about it. Well, we talk about Avram as being the first convert, right? That Avram first discovered God, and then people often quote the Midrash that Rashi quotes about Avram and Sarah, that et hanefesh asher asu v'charan, that they brought these people, that the nefesh that they created, as it were, literally in Haran. Avraham megayer et anashim, v'Sarah megayer et anashim, right? That Avram converted the men and Sarah converted the women, and the assumption is that Avram and Sarah were Jewish, right? Because how can they convert people? So the truth is, we know with Midrashim are not always to be taken 1,000% literally. And as great an Avram and Sarah were, and they were the first monotheists, but we can't really speak to them as the first converts or the first Jews in terms of the way we're Jewish. Because why? We know, and we just had Shavuot, and I'm sure, hopefully you heard, read, etc., this idea, if not this year, then past years, that the entire Jewish people converted at Mount Sinai, which is telling us that they weren't, even the progeny, the descendants of Avram and Sarah, they weren't fully Jewish yet. We were monotheists. We have all types of midrashim that Avram kept the Torah, right? Akev, from the Akev Asher Shema Avram, the Torah, Misotai, Chukatai, etc. The idea is that we have a midrashim that the Avot kept the Torah, but again, on a very basic, literal level, the first Jews were at Mount Sinai. We converted at Mount Sinai, and in fact, the whole process of conversion that we do nowadays is taken from Mount Sinai, right? We learned that the Jewish people brought a korban. Before they got to Mount Sinai, they brought a korban. We're supposed to bring a korban, and that's part of the process of conversion. And in fact, the Gemara has a dispute. The Gemara, after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, there's an opinion in the Gemara that we can't have any conversion anymore. How can we have conversion? Because one of the requirements is to bring a sacrifice, but no sacrifices. And that was overruled. That was overruled because the Torah references the idea that Gerim will always be for Dorot, right? They will, for eternity, they will be Gerim. And therefore, it means that can't bring a korban. It doesn't stop the conversion. And their descendants, that's what the descendants ultimately, when the Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt and sacrifices are inaugurated again, that their descendants will bring the korban. But the idea is taken from Mount Sinai. Again, the idea of tefillah, of immersion also, it's referenced in the 24th chapter of Shemot, the idea that the Jewish people immersed before they accepted the Torah, and also the idea of milah, that men had to have a circumcision. And then the whole idea of the Kabbalat Torah, we learned that a convert also has to accept the mitzvot. We're not going to get into that whole question. That's a huge question, of course. What does that mean exactly? But the idea that there has to be a Kabbalat mitzvot, we learn again from Mount Sinai. So the first converts were the Jewish people. And then the next convert, right, the next non-Jewish convert was, according to our rabbis, was Yitro, right? Yitro joined the Jewish people, the great Yitro. And then ultimately we learn a number of generations later about Ruth, etc. And we know what a great archetype Ruth is, but according to our rabbis, it was Yitro that was really the first convert, and that's this conversation that Moshe has with Yitro in this upcoming parsha. Yitro wants to leave, and Moshe says, no, we need you, we want you to stay, and that according to our rabbis, he ultimately does convert to Judaism. So and I'm always a little cautious, we have to be sensitive. Even we shouldn't call a convert a convert. That's one thing. It's they're Jewish people, and it's only if a convert wants to announce it or they're okay. That's one thing. But we should never point out that somebody was a convert the same way the Gemara talks about with a Baal Tshuva, somebody that is, I saw Yad Rabbi Buchwald, who's one of the great Jews of all time in our generation, of course, what he's done for Baal Tshuva, and I'm sure he will tell you we don't remind people about people's past. They are who they are now. We should never say to a person, I remember when you were doing X and Y, or who do you think you are? 8 years ago, you weren't even Jewish. That's a terrible thing, and that is a total that's a total infraction, a transgression of the ideas we talked about before of loving the ger. And that's another, again, misconception that we have, which is that, okay, there are Gerim in the world, there are converts in the world, but what does that have to do with me, right? If I'm living in my little area, I'll meet a convert here and there. But again, as we saw from there is an obligation upon each and every one of us to actively love the ger, right? So that's every born Jew should go out of their way to do whatever they can to fulfill these commandments. What the Rambam says, it black on white. There are 2 special commandments to love the convert. And that means we should actively be involved. We have an obligation to love the convert. That's in fact the real, the explanation that we have in Tosfot. You know, there's a Gemara in Kiddushin on Daf Ayin Aleph, I believe, on Daf 71, that the Gemara mentions the idea that, or it's a Tosfot. The Tosfot mentions that there's an idea that the Gerim are like a sapachet. That Gerim can be like a wound, it's a very negative language. And the Tosfot there tell us that what's that a reference to? It's a reference to that converts take such diligence and love what they're doing so much, it puts us to shame. It puts born Jews to shame. And this is something that, you know, I see all the time. When I've accompanied, you know, my students to the mikvah, I wish, you know, every time it happens and you see the incredible emotion and you see the love that here's somebody, like we read the Medrash before, somebody who didn't have to do this, and you see the love and the tears that are flowing, men, women, just the love that they have to finally, and it's a long road, it's a long journey, and we'll talk about that, you know, what a convert often has to go through to get to that stage, and then to see them, just this beautiful emotion overflowing. I wish we could bring, you know, every single observant Jew and non-observant Jew, every Jew to come to a mikvah, but especially, you know, there is a phenomenon a little bit, I'm sure some of us are aware of this. We have a few observant Jews who can be a little cynical about our religion, right? Who don't appreciate it, let's put it that way, at the very least. And to come and to see these people, these now Jews of choice come to, it's just it's an incredible experience, and it puts us to shame. And that's what the Tosfot is saying here, that why are converts in a sense bad for us? Because they highlight to God, we love, these converts are saying, God is saying, they love the Torah so much. Look at what they do. Look at the sacrifices. And the Jewish people, so I can, sometimes I get a little tired of things. I can, not anybody there, I'm sure, but or Tinek Bichlal, or people that we know. But in any event, we all know the feelings that can sometimes happen. We can just raise our hands sometimes and not appreciate the incredible gift that we have of the Torah. And the converts, generally, that's not going to happen, especially when they come to embrace the Torah, and that puts us to shame. So that's one of the ideas they have there. So again, so in terms of our obligations, you know, that we have, so we have to love. We should go out of our way to again, not to point them out, but when we know that there is a convert, quietly, without saying, I'm doing this, I'm doing this because I hear you're a convert. No, but just to reach out, to understand what sacrifices many converts have made to get to this stage. So before we'll get into that a little bit, I just want to read with you or share with you again this letter that the Ovadia writes to the Rambam. This goes back over 800 years, of course, that Ovadia writes to the Rambam, what about me? I'm a convert. And in our tefillot, we constantly are referencing our avot, we're referencing our ancestors. How can I say Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, right? How can I talk about in our Shmona Esrei to reference our ancestors? They're not my ancestors. My ancestors were not Jewish. What do I do? So the Rambam, again, it's a beautiful letter. I'm just going to we'll read it together. So again, the Rambam starts off by saying, until the end of all generations, anyone who converts and anyone who proclaims the unity of the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, is a disciple of Abraham, our father. That's an amazing thing also. That's why a convert is called, right, Ben Abraham or Bat Sarah. There's literally considered a disciple of Avram, peace be upon him. And this references what I said before, or what a few of you mentioned. So again, on a technical level, the Jewish people converted at Mount Sinai. But yes, on a symbolic level, Avram was the first convert, and Sarah was the first convert. On a symbolic level, bringing monotheism, of course, setting the stage for what ultimately became the full-blown force of Judaism when we received the entire Torah at Mount Sinai. So that's why every convert is a disciple of Avram and Sarah, and is one of his household. We're part of, Ger becomes part of Avram's household. What a great merit. Avram has restored him to righteousness, just as he restored the people of his generation through his teaching and instruction. Consequently, as a result of Avram's command to his sons and his household after them, right, to keep the divine word and to follow in his paths, future generations will convert. Right? So the Rambam is telling us there's always going to be conversion, and it's all based on Avram. Yes, so Avram again was that symbolic, really first convert. Avram, our father of blessed memory, is thus both the father of his worthy descendants who follow his ways and the father of his disciples and each convert. Therefore, you must say, he's talking to Avadja as a convert, our God and God of our fathers, because Avram of blessed memory was your father. Right? So of course you can say Elokei Abraham. Of course you can invoke the God of Avram. Avram is your father. Yitzchak is your father. Sarah is your mother, etc. Because Avram of blessed memory was your father. And you must say who bestowed an inheritance upon our fathers, right? It's not that the Nachala, it's not like our Yerusha was given to the Jews. No, it was given to you. It was given to you as a convert also, because the land was given to Avram. God promises the land of Israel to Avram, and therefore when the land ultimately gets into the hands of the Jewish people, you're part of that, even though it could be your great-great-great-great-grandparents were not Jewish, of course, but your other great-great-grandparents were Avram and Sarah. As it says, arise, walk about the land, right, through its length and its breadth, for I give it to you. But as for such verses who brought us forth from Egypt, or perform miracles for our fathers, right? We talk about taking us out of Egypt. How does a convert say that God took us out of Egypt if it wasn't their actual, literally, grandparents? If you want to change them, you may say he brought forth Israel from Egypt and who performed miracles for Israel. If you personally, Obadja, feel uncomfortable, you can do that if you want. But nothing whatsoever is lost if you do not make these changes. But you shouldn't. And in fact, other authorities discuss that, of course, if they're leading, if a convert decides, okay, I'm feeling comfortable, I'm going to say this, but if you're leading tefillah, then of course you have to follow the nusach of our tefillah. So he's saying, if you feel uncomfortable, go ahead, but a convert can say everything on the exact same language that we talk about our ancestors. You're also included in that. Because you have come under the wings of the Shekhinah and are accompanied by it. There's no difference between you and us. Okay, there's no difference. We're the same. You convert, you're a Jew like every other Jew. It is as if all the miracles were performed for both you and us. Behold, he says in Yeshayahu, let not the stranger who has joined himself to the Lord say, the Lord has separated me from his people, right? That if a convert converts, you shouldn't say that I'm somehow disconnected. No, you're part of the Jewish people like every other Jew. There is no difference between you and us in any matter. You are clearly obligated to say the blessings who chose us, who gave us, who bestowed an inheritance upon us, and who separated us, right? Asher Bachar Banu, right? It's all the same, right? You're Jewish like everybody else. The Creator may be exalted, chose you and separated you from the nations and gave you the Torah. God himself gave you the Torah. A Torah which is both for us and for converts, as it is written, there shall be one law for you and for the stranger. It shall be a law for all time throughout the ages. You and the stranger shall be alike before the Lord. The same law and the same regulation apply to you and to the stranger who resides among you. We had this in this past week's Parsha as well, right? This idea that the convert brings the korban like everybody else. The convert is the same. I can't say it enough. Know that our fathers left Egypt were mostly idolaters. In Egypt, they had mingled with the nations. Again, this is the idea of reminding us where we came from, right? Matchel b'gnuti Musayim b'shevet, right? On Pesach night, we have to recall where we came from. Don't think you're so great. Don't realize where you came from. In Pirkei Avot, we were told also, Kavya ben Mahalalel, remember you came from Miti Pasrucha. You came from don't think you're so exalted and so great. Reminder that you came like everybody else, and that the Jewish people were idolaters, and we went to the lowest levels as well. So we should never, chas v'shalom, look down upon anybody else because maybe their parents or grandparents or great-grandparents were not doing what we might think is the most dignified thing. Remember where you came from. Until God sends his Moshe, the master of all the prophets, peace be on him, he separated us from the nations, brought us under the wings of the Shekhinah, us and all the converts, instituting a single statute for all of us. Do not consider your lineage to be paltry. He tells that to Obadiah. Don't be embarrassed at whatsoever. Don't think that you have anything to be concerned about. If we are connected to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, you are connected to the one who spoke, right? We may, as born Jews, have a more direct connection to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, forgetting about what we just said above. But you, if that's what you think, you're connected more directly to God. You're connected to the one who spoke, and the world came into being. This is explicitly indicated in Yeshaya. One shall say, I am the Lord's, another shall use the name of Yahweh, etc. Okay, so I just wanted to make that clear again on the attitude that we must have towards convert from no less personality than the Rambam himself. Okay, so just we should always keep that in mind. When we know there's a convert, etc., we have to look upon them as like anybody else, and we should, if anything, shower more love upon them. Okay, so I want to just discuss briefly a little bit again some of this idea that if somebody converts because they were it's called converting for marriage. So I totally against that term. I can't say that nobody who has converted for marriage. But what I can tell you, I'll just tell you a little briefly about the program that we have and what somebody who converts has to go through. And this also relates to the misconception, which has been made popular, I think, in the media, the idea that you have to, in popular media, popular Jewish media and beyond, that you have to say 3 times, you have to turn away the convert 3 times, right? So where's that come from, right? What's the source for this idea that we all quote, you have to turn away a convert 3 times? Anybody know where that comes from? Yes, no, okay. It comes from the medrash of Ruth, right? So when Ruth, if you recall the story, of course, when Naomi and Orpah are following Ruth to go back to Israel from Moab, so Ruth says, what are you doing? I'm an old bitter lady. Get out of here. What do you need? I can't give you any more children to marry. Go back. Orpah turns away, and Ruth stays with her. And the Medrash points out there are 3 times there's a language that Ruth pushes away, that Naomi pushes away Ruth, and Ruth says, no, I'm going to stay with you. So the Medrash says, when it comes to conversion, you're supposed to push away a person 3 times. So there's some people take this very literally. I know certain people, if somebody's interested in conversion, if they call them, again, somebody who's involved, that they won't return their call. Or I know people who've set up meetings for converts, and then they won't show up. They'll tell them to come to certain, because they want to see if they're really serious. They want to see that if they're really serious, they're going to call me back 3 times. They're going to come to a meeting that I broke 3 times. I don't like this idea at all. Again, it's a medrash, what this says here. Anybody who goes through a serious process of conversion is turned away many more times than 3 times, right? If you undertake, and I'll just tell you a little bit about our program, which is called Route 613. We generally have about 20, 30 people at any one time in the program. We generally, in normal times, we meet on Wednesday nights live, and then I give a class when I'm in Israel online. Now, of course, everything's online. But basically, the expectation is, and people come in from different levels, but the expectation is that people will study for at least a year. Again, and many people who come to the program have already been studying a little, a lot or a little beforehand. The expectation is that they'll be keeping Shabbos for a while. The RCA, the Rabbinical Council of America, which we work with very closely to do the actual conversions, they have the expectation that person will be Shomer Shabbos for many, many months before, will be keeping kosher for many, many months before. So that whole process of studying on a weekly basis, of many hours, of totally transforming your life, going from losing friends and family, right? That's one of the things we often don't appreciate, what I was saying, when I alluded to before. People who go through this process, not everybody, but very often, especially people who come from a religious background. I've had Muslims, I've had students from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, other places. Mostly that's it's a small minority. The vast majority coming from either religious Christian backgrounds or just, not a specific religious background, but especially the people who come from religious backgrounds, their family thinks they're going to hell, right? Their family, literally, right? If you don't believe in the tenets of Christianity, etc., Jesus, that he's the Messiah, if you convert to Jew, you're going to hell, and people have to put up with that. I've spoken to many students and family members, sometimes trying to be a bridge, a mediator. It's very difficult. It's going to be very difficult, and even if it's not so much on the religious level, that how dare you convert? We brought you up to do this and that, and the friends, right? They're religious friends, but it's just more. Some people think they're crazy, right? Then that's a misconception, or that's something that bothers me a lot. Also, in the Jewish world, we often do joke about, what are you converting for? And I've heard many people say this directly to converts, even if it is with a little smile. What, are you crazy? What are you, nuts? How will you convert to Judaism? I wish I couldn't be Jewish if I had a choice. Okay, that's not such again, I know people say it sort of as a joke, but I think that can have an effect. If people say that all the time, a convert can say to themselves, what am I, what am I doing? So I think we have to be careful with that as well. So, so that's, but again, just to be sensitive to what many converts have to go through, even if it's not on a religious level, but on the social level, you have a group of non-Jewish friends, and now they see you doing some radical idea. It's one thing if you converted, reform, you're not keeping Shabbos, you're not keeping kosher, etc. If you go through, but people who have, who decide to go through or a halachic conversion to totally transform their lives, to start keeping kosher at home, and you can imagine what that does to their people's homes. And for parents who are good, what they have to do. And I've had, thank God, many experience with parents who say, we're going to kosher this part of our kitchen, or we have another kitchen, or we're going to keep separate utensils because we want our kids to come home. So, that's, we should always just be very sensitive again to this, to what a convert is going through on that level. Okay, so coming back to this kind of misconception about why people convert or what, so again, we know people often say that, they're converting for marriage, So first of all, it's a lot of chutzpah from us to just because somebody has a Jewish guy has a non-Jewish girlfriend or vice versa, and they convert and they end up getting married. So the point is, and I'll share with you just this passage from the Rambam over here. If you look, Ger shelo badku acharab, o shelo hodiu hamitzvot v'anshanu mal b'taval b'shnei shlosha ha'yod raise a ger. So let's say you have a situation where somebody, a prospective convert, goes to a Beit Din, and as we'll see before, we've radically changed the way conversion works. It was a lot simpler in older times. But basically, you have a situation where a convert comes to a Beit Din, and they don't really tell them anything. They don't tell them much. They just say, maybe they'll say one or two things, but they don't tell them what the mitzvot are. They don't tell them what the punishment is, and they go to the mikveh and they go through the process with the Beit Din. Harei ger, even if they're hedyotot, right? On a technical level, even though, again, this is one of the changes we've done, and we don't have time to go into all these things right now, but technically speaking, as long as you don't need rabbis to be on the Beit Din can be comprised of God-fearing people. You have to be a shomer mitzvah, but you don't have to be a rabbi to be on the Beit Din. So that's what the Rambam is talking about here. A person shows up, the Beit Din doesn't say 3 shomer Shabbos Jews, end up converting this person, harei ger. Even if you find out he was doing it, many of you are probably familiar with that Seinfeld, right? When Seinfeld was very machmir, right? Seinfeld was very upset that, I don't remember which, it wasn't Banfield, who was the guy? No, it wasn't that, it was another comedian, I think, that he was converting for the jokes, right? So Seinfeld was concerned about it. He was converting ledavar, he was converting for something. Again, it's not just women, it could be anything, right? You convert for the jokes, you convert for whatever the case is. Nevertheless, the Rambam tells us, even if you find that afterwards that he didn't have the best intentions, umal b'taval, right? He still goes to the mikvah. Yatsa miklal ha'akum, he's no longer considered an akum. That's another fascinating discussion, which we're not going to have, about the idea of the process of Gerim, right? You can talk about three ideas, right? You can talk about a person who's non-Jewish, you can talk about a person who's Jewish, and then you can talk about a person, for example, here, who's Yatsa Miklal Hakum, right? You can, he's left the status of a non-Jew, but he's not necessarily fully Jewish. And that can have ramifications in other areas. Can you invite a prospective convert to your home for Pesach, right? Theoretically speaking, you're not supposed to have, practically speaking, you're not really supposed to have non-Jews in your home for Yom Tov. A whole other question. One of the reasons that we can is because we can say the person is not really non-Jewish anymore. Anybody who's in the process of converting has Yatsa Miklal Hakum. Okay, but that's a whole other discussion. And you're sort of, he's a little bit in abeyance. He's still, again, we're not going to go into all the ramifications of this right now, but I just, but you want to make sure, you want to see, is the person, even though he converted, he didn't know anything, he converted for something else, for another reason, but still, you give him a chance to see, okay, maybe he's going to be a good Jew. So even if he goes and worships idols afterwards, he's still considered like a Jewish person on this level that he can do kiddushin, okay? etc. And then that's how he explains all the wives of Shimshon and Shlomo, etc. So again, we're not going to go into that right now, but I just want you to see this idea that even if a person is converting for something else, he has ulterior motives, it doesn't necessarily mean that that person is not Jewish. Now, the point I'm trying to make here when we talk about people converting for marriage is the point that I make to any time of my students, over the last 15 years, I would say maybe 30 to 40%, or maybe even less, somewhere around there, are people who are in a relationship, meaning the majority of my students have been people who wanted to convert for other reasons, whether it's because they were intellectually stimulated. Also, you can say all these things are ulterior motives, right? They're doing it for intellectual stimulation. They're doing it because socially they had, and this happens a lot, right? People who meet they have a nice Jewish roommate or friends in college, and they're invited to go there for Pesach, or for Shabbos, and they see the family together. That's an ulterior motive in a sense, but that's what's brought them to explore Judaism more. And then you have a lot of people as well who convert because they find out on birthright that the Reform conversion that their mother underwent 30 years ago, even though these people are incredibly involved with Judaism, it's not halakhically accepted. And that's also that's a whole other can of worms, of course, right? These are people who, and we forget about these people sometimes, these are people whose whole identity is as a Jew. They come to Israel, they're involved in this or that organization, they go on birthright, and then they're told, you're not going to be accepted here. You come to Israel, you can't get married, your kids aren't going to be considered Jewish. That's a huge slap in the face, and a lot of psychological and emotional baggage that can go with that. So that's a nice sized percentage of people as well. Again, either a non-Orthodox conversion of their mother, or again, just no conversion, the patrilineal descent. They grew up in the Reform movement, again, very involved, and they find out, and literally can be the first time when they're 22, that that's not going to fly in the Orthodox world. So, but the point is that even when somebody comes to me with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, what do I tell them? I say, I get this here or that, and they're usually coming at the point where it's a very serious relationship. I'm meeting in a couple hours with another couple. It's actually, it's a fascinating story of a very prominent person. I'll just keep it at that. That's very widely, not going to give away anything, because that's another thing. I have to be extremely sensitive. I don't talk about people that they're converts with that unless my students say I can, or we're going to be doing some interviews, including with Jesse, I hope soon, about some of their experiences becoming converts. But the bottom line is, whenever the person comes to me, and like I said, they're usually, and this was a tshuva pointed over 100 years ago, when civil marriage started to be a possibility. So authorities, so Poskim said that this whole issue of marriage is no longer, that somebody is supposedly converting from marriage is not really an issue anymore. Why? Because they can get married civilly. It's not like it's not 300 years ago when you couldn't get married to a Jew. If you were a Christian, you couldn't get married to a Jew. You could literally get killed, right? Or you converted, right? The famous story of Avraham the Ger from Vilna, right? The famous story that he basically gives up his life to stay Jewish. That was really pikuach nefesh to convert in many Christian areas. So nowadays that doesn't apply, especially in America nowadays. There's no stigma. 50, 60%, whatever the statistic is, of people convert, intermarry. There's no stigma. So that's why so many certain achronim said already, anybody who is planning to get married with a non-Jew, we don't have to worry about that. It means they're not really they're not converting because of marriage. They're converting because they want to become Jewish, because they could get married. They can go to City Hall, they can go to a church, they can go to wherever they want, interfaith minister, they can do whatever they want, and they can get married. But beyond that, even forgetting about that halachic idea as well, what I tell converts, prospective converts, again, whether they're going out with, it's more applicable, of course, when they're going out with somebody else. I tell them, I don't really care. It doesn't matter. Not that I don't care, but it doesn't matter. It's not really germane to where you're going to be as a Jew, why you're coming. Right? Whether you're coming to this because you started going out with a Jewish boyfriend, or whether it's because you went to a course at college and you were turned on to something, or again, just the social ideas, your family. The importance of family, doesn't matter. What matters is at the end of this year or year and a half or 2 years, or sometimes even more process, that when you come to the Beit and you can say to them, I accept the mitzvot. And I don't care, not that I don't care again. It doesn't matter that I love this Jewish person, but I love the Torah. I love what I'm doing right now. And that's why I went through this process of a year of maybe losing some friends, of transforming my life, of going to shul, of stopping stopping to work on Shabbos and to use my email and texting and everything that I do, because I love it. So it doesn't really matter what the original idea was, what the davar was. Again, that's the word used, ledavar, for mammon, right? That's another thing that the Gemara says, right? People think Jews are rich. I've had that more than once. They don't say it exactly like that. People think they become Jewish. They know the network that we have, etc. So if you get into that network, said, okay, that's, whatever it is that they tell me, it doesn't really matter. It's what you're able to say to the Beit Din at the end of that process, that I'm standing here because I love Judaism. That's really the most important thing. I'll just do a couple more things and then we'll take some questions. Okay, I'll just read a couple of things from the Shulchan Aruch. This is more just to show you that things have changed in terms of we're a lot more machmir, we're a lot more stringent, as I think a lot of people realize when it comes to conversion. So again, this is the process, and this is based on the Gemara, of course, and the Rambam, right? When a person comes to convert, you say to him, what did you see that motivated you to come to convert? Again, this is from the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch. If you know that Israel in this time, that the Jewish people are oppressed, etc., insane. Some of this didn't come up well, but basically, you say to the person, and this is at least until a few years ago, this was a little harder to say. Now with the rise of anti-Semitism, more it is easier to say. Basically, you say to the person, "Why do you want to join the Jewish people? We're oppressed. People hate us. What do you want to do?" And so it says, and if he says, and I know this, and I still want to become part of your people, receive him immediately, right? So again, that's really all the Beit Din needs to hear. This is before he knows anything, right? That's the way the process, according to the Gemara. It wasn't like he went through a course for a year and learned. No, the person says, I'm interested in converting, and that's why you could have the Rambam I just quoted before, where a person shows up to a Beit Din and he just converts, right? They don't tell him what the mitzvot are. So basically, the first thing you ask the person who walks in off the street, you say, do you know that we're hated? You want to do this? Are you really sure you want to do this? Person says, yeah, I know you're hated, but I love your people. Receive him immediately, right? So again, the process has started now. It's almost like he's not Jewish yet, but he's part of the process. He's almost there. Receive him immediately and tell him the principles of the faith, that God is one and idol worship is forbidden, and tell him a lot about this and teach him a few of the lighter mitzvot. and a few of the more stringent mitzvot, right? That's based on the Gemara again. You don't teach him like we teach him nowadays. You don't teach him as much as possible. You teach him a few of the more important, a few of the lesser important ones, including we know one of the things you're supposed to teach him about is matnat aniyim. You're supposed to teach him about that if you go to a field, the story of Ruth, right? That if you leave things, if you forget things, you leave a corner of the field. That's one of the things you teach them, but you don't have to go through so many different things. You don't have to teach them that you're reading the Gilad Esther or that you fast on Tisha B'Av, presume. You teach them a few things, okay? And you teach them some of the punishments. If you tell them, if you ate the forbidden fat, if you ate, you would be, before you came, if you eat non-kosher, no problem. But now that you're becoming Jewish, you do that, or you don't keep Shabbos, you're going to be punished, okay? And there's going to be capital punishment, theoretically, as well. So that's what you have to tell them. Don't say too much about this. Again, 4 lines from the bottom. Don't say too much about this, and don't get too specific either. This is the Shulchan Aruch talking, right? You don't have to get into too much detail. And when you teach them about the punishment of the mitzvot, also teach them about the rewards of the mitzvot, and teach them that in the doing of certain mitzvot, that will merit life in the world to come. And here's an important statement. There isn't a complete righteous person, rather a master of wisdom that does the mitzvot and understand them. We're Jews, we've learning in yeshiva for years. We're also not completely righteous. We don't know everything. We do our best, so we can't expect so much more from the convert. We teach him the basics, and he says he wants to join. We accept that person. And say to him that you shall know the world to come is hidden from the righteous, etc. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing there. Basically, if you tell him all these things about the world to come as well and the rewards, I'm skipping that. If he receives it, circumcise him immediately. If he accepts this, you do the conversion right away, basically. Okay? And the same thing, he talks about the women. And 3 learned scholars stand at his back and teach him some of the mitzvot. And if it is a women sit her in the water up her neck, and the Beit Din is outside. And they teach her some of the easy mitzvot. Again, it seems like she didn't really know much before, right? It's in the Beit Din. It's in the mikvah. You're teaching her some of the easy mitzvot, some of the more stringent mitzvot. It's in the water, immerses, and that's it. Okay, so again, it's a little more complicated than that. But again, I want to make the point that nowadays we are much more stringent, and there are good reasons. There are good reasons for it, because we are on a much higher level. We do have to be concerned that people are not necessarily converting because they love it, but because we are wealthy or we are this and that. And things have changed, and that's a whole other discussion. But the bottom line is, in earlier times, it was much easier to convert. It was, it's a whole question about what was the conversion with Ruth, right? So we'll leave that for another time as well. But the bottom line is nowadays, and this goes back to what I started with, the idea that you push away a person 3 times. We're pushing them away all the time, right? By making them come to class or learn with somebody and constantly monitoring that they're keeping kosher and that they're keeping Shabbos and making sure that they've done that for X number of months and then drilling them down. That's what the typical Beit Din does. Again, there are, there's it's a whole other question, like I said, with a different Beit Din. But you see also there's a lot of it's not, as long as you have a group of 3, and it's all rabbis now who are halachic, who are serious rabbis, and what that means is, but bottom line, it's very hard to uproot a conversion. It's very hard to do that. It's once a person stands in front of a Beit Din and says, I accept the mitzvot, right? And there's a famous tshuva of Rav Chaim Ozer Mikrochinsky in terms of the idea that as long as a person doesn't say, I'm not keeping this, I accept the mitzvot except for that, that's a problem. But if a person actually says, I accept the mitzvot, but I know I'm not going to be able to keep X and Y, or it's going to be very difficult, you can still accept that convert. He's being realistic. He's not saying I reject the mitzvot. He's saying it's going to be hard for me to keep that mitzvah. Again, that's as you can see from all these issues, there's a lot more to discuss. But I wanted to at least briefly get across some of the main ideas of that I've had the merit to work with, the converts that I've had over the merit to work with, which is, again, first of all, so many amazing people, and they're, and some of the things that have been spoken about converts are so unfair, and we have to be so careful. And even if you think this person converted for that, it's chas v'shalom that if somebody should think that I have a right to make some silly comment online or this or that about this or that convert. Again, a person who is converting, quote unquote, for marriage, they're not ultimately, as long as they go through that process and they can stand before the Beit Din, it's not really for marriage. It's because they love it, and all the other things that we discussed there as well. I'll sum up a little bit more in a second. I just want to see if there are any other questions. And let me stop the sharing thing here. Yes, we have. Hold on. Yes, you can speak. I guess I can. Yeah, Melech.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting share. I understand the issue of loving the ger. That is, after somebody has converted, then that person has the status of a ger, and all the 36 or 46 rules apply. But to me, it's always for a long time, it's been a question as to why one should be so quick as we are to accept Gerim. And recently I was reading a drasha of Rabbi Lamb that he wrote in 1974, and he said there that he presided over a lot of conversions, and he was very strict. He says, my standards were high, and still I must confess that the majority of those whose conversions I presided failed. If I had to make a general statement, I would say that conversions as a rule are not successful. And he makes a point that, it's not like we're talking, for the most part, we're not talking about people who are steeped in Avodah Zarah, and it would really be a mitzvah to get them to move to a status where they're not violating Shev Mitzvot B'nai Noach. Most of the people who convert are probably satisfying the dictates of Shev Mitzvot B'nai Noach, especially, as you mentioned, a lot of the people, it sounded like, who come to you are religious people anyway. So, do you think that, in fact, the attitude in certain circles that says, we really push them away, and really it should be very, very difficult for somebody to convert, because you bring them in, and then if they don't keep the mitzvahs, that's more of a problem than if they're not brought in.
Yeah, so it's a very, very good question. So I think what I was trying to say is that, I can only speak for myself, and my experiences, which is that anybody who we have a very rigorous program, and I've had many situations where there's a many situations where the Jewish boyfriend comes from a very religious, quote unquote, I don't know, there's no such word as very religious. It comes from a totally Orthodox background, Hasidic background. I've had people, these, families of very, again, prominent Rabbanim and others, and many day school graduates, many who've gone through. And I can tell you, they invariably say, they wish they had learned this or that when they, at least for myself, I try to teach them on a very high level. I try to teach them as if this is obviously explaining things, but to be sophisticated and to focus really on and to demand a lot. So what I was saying is that anybody who goes through our program is going to be learning a lot. And the expectation, again, most of the people who convert with me go through the Rabbinic Council of America. And if anything, I would say they're maybe too strict. Don't get me in trouble here. But if any, they have very high standards. They definitely do. And I've gone more than once. I've had discussions with the Rabbanim, the Dayanim, on that I think this person's ready, and so I can just tell you from personally, I would, if I felt somebody was not ready, and I always do my best to ensure before they go for the Beit Din that we've discussed things and that I know that they've been keeping mitzvot. I wouldn't recommend somebody, and I'm usually involved in the process. If I knew that somebody was not, if I felt, from specific, people say, well, they can, pull the wool over you. I don't think that's ever really happened. If somebody who goes through this process of, again, a good year of coming to class every week and the expectations and doing other learning, by and large, the vast majority of those people are going to be serious. Can it happen? Of all these people that I know, the truth is I know less than on one hand people who are not 100% religious. Doesn't mean that they're not. I just don't, it's hard to keep track of every. I do try. That's one of the other issues that, is very important. We've been talking a lot the last few years about requirements for conversion, but it's so important to do all the follow-up after conversion. Somebody who's single. That's why, again, one of the misconceptions, I actually meant to say this before, is that I found it's generally been a very positive thing. Not that we should encourage this at all, don't get me wrong. But when somebody does come in, a Jewish guy comes in with a non-Jewish girl, overwhelmingly, it's been an incredibly positive experience, because what happens usually is you end up making two Jews, right? The Jewish person coming in, usually, not always, there's definitely be exceptions to this, but often the person who's coming in is not 100% observant, right? And there's a reason sometimes it just happens at work or other places. There's often a reason that they are going out seriously with a non-Jew. So this is an opportunity. You're really making two Jews. Again, we don't encourage people to do that. But what happens when you, and I quote unquote make them, I can't force them, I very much encourage the couple, go to the classes and go through the process together, is that invariably they really grow together in their love for Judaism, because they're experiencing it together. But bottom line to your question again is that, from my perspective, I agree with you. It shouldn't be. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. It's, trust me, I get constant emails right now. Right now it's very difficult. Just keep this in mind. Conversions have been stopped for the last 3-4 months. I have a few students, one very much who was on basic schedule before Pesach, and now she's in total limbo, and she was hoping her life is in total limbo. And you have a lot of people like this, all conversion as part of the coronavirus side effects have been stopped, for the last, at least in the New York area, and in some other places maybe not. But yeah, so that I hope answers the question. Yes, we should have a high standard, but again, there's many sources we don't have time to go into now, but you saw it in even the last source we just read in the Rambam. Once a person says, I want to become Jewish, this is in the Shulchan Aruch as well. Once a person says that, you accept them immediately. We should. And there are sources out there to say the idea of a havtem et hager starts in the process of Gerim. It starts when the person is already beginning to be a ger. That's why I don't like this idea of pushing people away, not showing up for meetings. No, they're going to show their mettle, over the course of that 9 months or 12 months or 18 months. So, okay, any other last questions or comments or et cetera? We can do another session. All right. I see we went past our time, so I don't want to. So I hear it's a nice day in Teaneck, so people want to go outside, right? Like the Rabbi Akiva Eger says in the 1831 pandemic, you're supposed to go for walks outside.
It is very nice here. The sun is out and it's pretty good weather, so appreciated for that. I just had one, I guess maybe a final thought. You mentioned you stress really that it's important for you to love the ger, right? Because Hashem loves the ger. And you mentioned about not treating people badly. What do you think it means? People listening here, what does that mean practically about loving the ger? I think there's a fine line to walk between treating someone differently, reminding them that they're ger, I'm loving you because you're ger, and just showing outright love. What do you think that looks like?
Yeah, so I think just to amplify what I said before, just to recognize what that convert, that now Jew, has given up by coming. It means you have to be, they may not have, first of all, they don't have a family to go to for Yontif, okay? They're not going, if they're single, it's very hard, and that's a whole lot. We can speak another few hours on this, and unfortunately some of our wonderful shadchanim sometimes can make a ger feel bad, or say, they only will set them up with, they'll only set them up with other gerim, which I think, again, if two gerim fall in love, wonderful. But the idea of a priori setting that up, I think is a very bad idea. You want the ger to have a Jewish family that can support them, that they can grow up together. We haven't even talked about the whole issue of kids with grandparents. That's a whole other fascinating issue also, and non-Jewish holidays and what you do there. So just to keep that in mind, that we have observant Jews, we have our own timeline and schedule. But coming from a non-Jewish background, excuse me, they're not going to have that family to go to. Again, like when they're single, as I just started to say, they can have a harder time. We should go out of our way to try to set them up if they're single. We should do that for all singles, of course, but there's an extra special, they don't have the network, right? We grew up and observe in a Teaneck or 5 towns or wherever we are, we have a network. We're very lucky, right? We all know that. We go to Jewish schools, the camps. We have a tremendous network. The converts aren't tapped into that. They don't have that. And even for work, as I said before, we make a call or to somebody, we have protexia. So just to really do our best to, around Chagim and Shabbos, to make sure that they have a place to go to, that, and to during even like a Christmas time, perhaps, just to make sure that they're okay. Their family may be making them feel bad that they're not. So make sure that they're involved with Hanukkah. Again, there's a lot more I can say, but that just to try to really to reach out as much as possible, and to be sensitive and try to think what they may be going through at a specific time, etc. So that's briefly.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay.
I know we're a little bit over time. Just want to thank you again for joining us. It was a great share and very appreciative. Thank you.
Our pleasure. See you later, everybody. All the best. Have a good day. And then we'll see you in Yerushalayim soon, I hope. It's nice and safe here. Everything's open, right? We wear our masks, but Bezrat Hashem.
Hopefully sometime soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All the best.